Part 1. The Lease. It wasn't the ad that drew Joanna in, it was the silence that followed it. She had been hunting for an apartment for weeks, filtering listings for something quiet, close to downtown Savannah, and affordable. Nothing felt right. Every tour left her cold, until this one popped up. Historic one-bedroom apartment, Ardsley Park, $800 a month, no pets, must meet in person. That price was absurdly low for the area, and Ardsley Park, tree-lined streets. Old homes with broad porches, southern charm. It felt too good to be true, she replied. The message back was short. Meet at 4 p.m. Tuesday, 6B. No name, no phone number, just an address and a buzzer code. The building was old, beautiful in that faded, heavy way some places in Savannah are. Ivy up the sides, rusted balconies, heavy oak trees that made the air feel cooler than it was. The kind of place where stories lived in the walls. She climbed the narrow staircase to the third floor. Hallways painted a soft eggshell white. Mismatched brass doorknobs, faint smell of lavender and age. Apartment 6B sat at the end of the hall. When she knocked, the door opened almost immediately. An older man in a worn cardigan stood there, thin, with a salt and pepper beard and bright eyes that didn't blink enough. "You're early," he said. "Am I?" Joanna glanced at her phone. 3:58 p.m. He stepped aside. "That's all right. Come in." The apartment was small but warm. Original hardwood floors, high ceilings, wide windows that let in golden light. A faint scent of cloves. Joanna took it all in. The kitchen was quaint, yellow tiles, 1940s stove. The living room had a built-in bookshelf and a writing desk tucked beneath the window. "It's lovely," she said. "You'd be the only tenant on this floor for now," he said. Quiet building, no smoking, no pets. "What happened to the last tenant?" she asked. The man didn't answer at first. Then she moved. Joanna nodded. Something in his voice made her pause. "I'll take it," she said. He handed her the lease, already filled out, her name typed across the top. She blinked. "I'm very efficient," he said, smiling. Her first night was uneventful. She unpacked slowly, methodically. Her last apartment had been a rushed exit. This one, she wanted to treat differently. At 2 a.m., she heard footsteps. Not heavy, light, like someone pacing in the hallway. She got up and looked through the peephole. Empty. She opened the door, and the air felt wrong. Cold, thick. But the hallway was empty. She shut the door, locked it. Didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, she passed a neighbor on the stairs, a woman in her 50s, red lipstick and a velvet headband. She paused and looked Joanna up and down. "You're in 6B?" she asked. "Yes." A strange look passed over the woman's face. "You look just like her." "Who?" But the woman just kept walking. Joanna started hearing things on the second night. A soft clacking sound, rhythmic, mechanical. She traced it to the wall beside her bed, a typewriter. She listened closely. The rhythm didn't stop. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. She knocked on the wall. The sound stopped, and then a knock from the other side. 3 slow taps. She tried to shake it off. Told herself it was an old pipe, a neighbor, a trick of the building. But the third night, while hanging clothes in the closet, she found something strange. A panel was loose in the back of the closet. When she pried it open, a slip of paper fluttered to the floor. A single sentence, typed on yellowing paper. "If you hear the typewriter, don't answer the door." Part 2. The Whisper in the Wall. Joanna stared at the note in her hands. If you hear the typewriter, don't answer the door. The keys had left deep impressions in the paper, as though whoever typed it had done so in a panic. The edges were brittle. A stain, coffee, blood, smudged the top corner. She read it again, trying to shake off the unease. This had to be a prank, or a leftover from some quirky past tenant, right? But the sound she'd heard the night before hadn't felt quirky. It had felt wrong. She taped the note to the fridge. Not out of dismissal, out of need. She wanted to see it every day, to remind herself that it was real, that the warning wasn't imagined. By the end of her first week in 6B, Joanna had stopped using the bedroom closet. There was a hum inside the wall behind it, subtle, low, almost like a human breath. And every few nights, the typing returned, sometimes soft, sometimes frantic. It never lasted more than 10 minutes. She stopped trying to knock back. On Friday, she brought banana bread to her neighbor across the hall, the woman in the velvet headband. Figured I should introduce myself properly, Joanna said. The woman took the bread with a tight smile. I'm Esther, she said, not inviting Joanna in. You're the one in 6B. Yes. Esther's smile faded. How long have you been there now? Almost a week. You sleep okay? Joanna hesitated. Sometimes. Esther stared at her. If you start hearing your name, leave. Joanna blinked. Excuse me? Esther looked down at the banana bread. It's nothing, just old stories. Thank you for this. She closed the door. That night, Joanna heard whispering, not typing, not knocking, but something else. It came from the wall behind the bathroom mirror, a slow, dragging whisper, like someone was trying to form a word but had forgotten how. She pressed her ear against the glass. It stopped. She didn't sleep. Saturday afternoon, she went exploring. Down to the basement, through the laundry room and past the old boiler. She found a rusted maintenance panel with the word Electrical Unit 6 carved into it. Inside was a jumble of wires and a folder, a thin manila file. No name on it. Inside were 3 things: a black and white photo of a woman in her late 20s, pale, short hair, intense eyes. A faded apartment key labeled 6B. A single sentence typed on the back of a blank receipt. She's always been here. Joanna showed the photo to Esther the next day. The older woman studied it. She looks like you, she said. You said something the other day about someone I looked like. Esther looked down. Her name was Rebecca. She lived in 6B before you. Long before. The landlord doesn't talk about her. What happened? She disappeared. When? Esther looked up. 1983. Joanna blinked. But this picture, it looks new. I know. That night, the typing started again. Only this time, it was accompanied by something else. A whispering voice. Not from the wall, from the closet. It said one word. Joanna. To be continued in Part 3, The Woman Who Wasn't There. Part 3. The woman who wasn't there. The voice had said her name, whispered it through the closet like it had always known her. Not shouted, not screamed, just said it, like an old friend, like a warning. Joanna didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch with every light on, a blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders, the photo of the mysterious woman in her lap. Rebecca, the woman from 6B, the one who disappeared in 1983, the year Joanna's parents had met. The resemblance wasn't casual. It was uncanny. Same eyes, same shape of the jaw. Even the slight scar under the left eyebrow, Joanna had always assumed hers came from falling as a toddler. Now, She wasn't so sure. She flipped the photo over. Nothing written, but the background, it was this apartment, the same wallpaper, the same trim around the window. It didn't make sense. The next morning, Joanna went online. She searched for local missing persons records, newspaper archives, obituaries, police bulletins. Nothing under Rebecca and Savannah for 1983. Nothing at all. It was like the woman never existed. Then she had an idea. She reverse image searched the photo. No results. No online trace. She ran the photo through a facial recognition app. It flagged one possible match. Joanna Lee Harrow. Age 31. Location Savannah, Georgia. Herself. She stared at the screen. The app thought the woman in the photo was her. Later that day, she walked the neighborhood, looking, listening. At the edge of the park, she passed a small cafe with a corkboard in the window. Community events, band posters, spiritual readings. One flyer caught her eye. Remembering the Forgotten, a discussion on collective memory loss and urban legends, hosted by the Nemesny Group. Thursday, 7 p.m., Coastal Georgia Community Hall, Room 4B. The name made her skin crawl. Nemesny. She remembered the word from college, the Greek goddess of memory, mother of the muses. Something told her she had to go. The room was dimly lit. A circle of chairs. No more than a dozen people. Most older, a few college-aged. A man in his 60s sat at the front, trim beard, tweed blazer, sharp eyes that never stopped moving. "I'm Walter," he said, "and we are the Nemesny Group. We're not a cult, I promise." Laughter. Light, but beneath it, something heavy. Walter continued. "We gather to talk about the things most people forget, the things we're not supposed to remember. Not ghosts, not myths, people, places, entire lives that vanish from collective recall." Joanna raised her hand. "Like who?" Walter nodded. "Tell us." She hesitated, then pulled the photo from her bag. "This woman, Rebecca. She lived in my apartment, I think, but no records exist. My neighbor says she disappeared, but I think I'm starting to become her." The room fell silent. Walter stood and took the photo. He looked at it for a long moment, then handed it to the woman beside him. "Does anyone else recognize her?" One by one, they passed the photo. No one did. Joanna watched their faces. No flicker of recognition, but she knew what she saw. After the meeting, Walter pulled her aside. 6B, you said?" "Yes." He looked troubled. "That unit has come up before, twice in the last 10 years. People with the same story, different names. Always a woman, always alone, always the same apartment." Joanna's pulse quickened. "What happened to them?" "I don't know," Walter said. "They stopped coming." Back at home, she checked her phone. 6 missed calls, all from her sister. She called back. No answer. She texted, "Everything okay?" The reply came 5 minutes later. "Who is this?" Joanna froze. She replied, "Joanna, your sister." 3 dots. Then, "Sorry, I don't have a sister. Please stop texting me." Part 4, the group. Joanna stared at the message. "Sorry, I don't have a sister. Please stop texting me." The screen didn't lie. The number was her sister's. Same area code, same contact photo. Same thread of old conversations. All still there. Except now, they ended with a stranger. She sat on the kitchen floor for 20 minutes, the fridge humming behind her like a disinterested witness. Then she texted back, "Call me, please." No response. The next morning, she messaged Walter from the Nemesny Group. He replied within minutes. You need to come back, tonight. Bring anything else strange you found. We'll try to help. She gathered her folder, the photo, the typed note, the key from the basement, and a voice recording she'd made of the whisper in the wall. She'd listened to it at least a dozen times. The word was unmistakable, Joanna, but only when she played it on her phone. Every time she uploaded it to her laptop, it was silent, like it didn't want to be shared. That night, the group met in a smaller room. Walter had rearranged the chairs. At least 20 people showed up. She shared everything. The whispers, the basement file, the neighbor who disappeared, the sister who suddenly didn't remember her, and most of all, the apartment. When she showed them the photograph, someone in the back audibly gasped. A man in his 30s, with a birthmark under his eye, raised his hand. "That's not just your story," he said. "That's mine." His name was Daniel. In 2015, he'd lived in the same building, Unit 6C. He'd dated a woman from 6B. Her name was Veronica. She had the same hair, the same eyes, the same voice. One day, she stopped answering texts. Then her number disconnected. Then he asked around, and no one remembered her. Her landlord said no one had lived in 6B for years. Daniel showed them an old drawing she'd given him, a typewriter with a cracked key. Joanna's face turned pale. "I've heard it," she whispered. "The typing." After the meeting, Walter sat with her alone. "There's a theory," he said. "We've never proven it, but we think there's a cycle, a pattern. Certain people get overwritten. By what? We don't know, but we believe it's tied to places. Anchor points. Apartment 6B seems to be one of them. Why women? No clue, but they all fit a profile. Solitary, sensitive to patterns, history with dreams or déjà vu." Joanna swallowed. "What happens to them?" Walter's expression darkened. "They fade." She asked if she could stay in the room that night. Walter agreed. She fell asleep curled in a chair, surrounded by notes, evidence, and the faint hum of the AC unit. At 3:08 a.m., she woke up to a sound. Typing. She sat up. It was coming from her phone. The screen was black, but the speaker hissed and clicked like tiny keys tapping out a sentence. Then a voice, her own, whispered. She wrote herself out. Joanna dropped the phone. The next day, her mail didn't arrive. She checked with the building manager. "Unit 6B?" the woman asked. "Yes." The woman frowned. "We haven't had a 6B in years." Joanna stared. "But I live there." The woman looked down at her clipboard. "There's a 6A, a 6C, no B. Must be a mistake." Joanna ran upstairs. The number plate on her door was gone. Part 5, the first Joanna. The number was gone. Not scratched out, not removed, just absent. The metal plate where 6B had been was smooth, as though it had never existed. Joanna stood there in the hallway, keys in hand, heart pounding. She tried to unlock the door. The key worked. Inside, everything was as she left it. But it felt different. Not darker, not colder, just wrong. Like the walls had shifted slightly when she wasn't looking. She called Walter. His number went straight to voicemail. She tried Daniel, the man from the group. A message told her the number was no longer in service. She emailed herself a message from her laptop. When she checked her phone, no new mail. She called her sister again. This time it rang. A woman answered. Calm, confused. "I think you have the wrong number." Joanna tried to explain. "I'm sorry," the voice said, "but there's no Joanna at this number. I think you might want to talk to someone." Click. She left the apartment and walked the neighborhood, needing air, needing anchors. The coffee shop on Drayton Street was gone. In its place, a tax prep office she didn't remember. She checked her GPS. The map still showed the cafe. She zoomed in. The address label flickered, then disappeared. Back home, she searched online for the building's history again. Nothing. No listings. No landlord profile. She went to her lease file. The folder was there, but inside, blank sheets. Typed text, erased. Not scratched out, just absent, as if the ink had never touched the page. At the bottom of the folder, tucked into the seam, was a single sheet of paper, typed, "You are the third." And below that, "She still remembers. Look in the mirror." The mirror in the hallway had been there since day one. Oval, framed in dark oak, slightly warped from age. Joanna stood before it. Her reflection stared back, tired, pale, blinking fast. Then it blinked when she didn't. She stepped back. The reflection stayed. Then it smiled. She did not. The smile faded, and the reflection lifted one finger and pointed. Joanna turned. The closet. The closet door creaked open. Inside, clothes, boxes, the panel in the back. She pulled it loose again. This time, behind the panel, a leather-bound journal. The name inside, Joanna Lynn Barrow, 1963. Her first name, her middle name, a last name she didn't recognize. She flipped through pages of ink. The machine knows my name. I tried to leave. I ended up back here. The landlord said I never signed anything, but I remember the pen. I remember the weight of it. My mother came to find me, but when she knocked, I wasn't there. I watched her from the window, and she walked away, forgetting. They all forget, except the machine. At the back of the journal, a Polaroid, a woman standing in the window of this apartment, wearing Joanna's favorite sweater, hand pressed against the glass, eyes pleading. The caption on the back, "Don't let her write your ending." Part 6, the protocol. Joanna didn't sleep. The journal sat on her lap for hours as she sat in the middle of her living room floor, surrounded by every light she could turn on. She'd read it 3 times, cover to cover. It felt like a message in a bottle sent across decades, from herself to herself. But if there were others, 2 Joannas before her, then what was this place? And who or what was doing this? Her phone still didn't ring. Her laptop wouldn't connect. She checked her own name online. Nothing. Not even a LinkedIn. At dawn, she walked to the library downtown, one of the few buildings in Savannah that still felt solid, untouched by whatever was unraveling around her. She searched local records for Joanna Lynn Barrow. Only one match, a birth record from 1963. No death certificate, no marriage license, no disappearance. Like she had just faded. She went to the address on the birth certificate. The house was still there, a bungalow with green shutters and a hand-painted mailbox. She knocked. A woman in her 70s answered. "Yes?" Joanna hesitated. "Did you know someone named Joanna Barrow?" The woman stared at her. Her face changed. "Is this a joke?" "No, I'm trying to find her. She was my daughter." Joanna's throat closed. "Was?" "She ran away," the woman said, "in 1984. Said she was moving to Savannah. She sent one letter, then nothing." "Did you look for her?" "We tried, but everyone said she didn't exist. Not legally. Not in leases, not in hospitals. It was like she never arrived." Joanna said nothing. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you asking now?" Joanna reached into her bag. She pulled out the Polaroid. The woman gasped, covered her mouth. "That's her," she whispered. But that sweater? I knit that for her the year before she left. How do you have this? Joanna didn't answer. She just said, I think I'm her. That night, she went back to the building, walked up to the door. There was a name on it now. 6B, vacant. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The furniture was gone. So were her clothes, her books, her food, everything. The only thing left was the desk. On it, a typewriter. A single sheet of paper fed into it, typed across the top, the protocol for erasure. She sat down and read. The subject must be isolated. Identity must fray. Memory must bend. Pattern must repeat. The apartment, the silence, the typewriter. When she begins to write, the cycle completes. Erasure is not death. It is the loss of memory in others. Self remains until overwritten. At the bottom of the page, begin your first line. Her hands trembled, but they moved. Typed. My name is Joanna, and I remember. The machine clicked. The lights blinked. Somewhere the door slammed. Behind her, the closet creaked open. Part 7. The erasure. The closet door opened slowly. Joanna didn't turn to look. She couldn't. Her fingers hovered above the typewriter, still warm from the first sentence. My name is Joanna, and I remember. Behind her, soft footsteps, bare, careful, and then nothing. The next morning, the typewriter was gone. In its place, on the desk, a blank notepad and a pen. Joanna tried the front door. It opened. She walked out into the hall. No neighbors, no doors, just smooth walls where numbers had been. She ran down the stairs. The lobby was gone, replaced by a long, massive tunnel. Empty corridor lined with mirrors, none of which reflected her. She stepped into the street. Savannah was missing. Not in ruins, not burned, just blank. The buildings were outlines. The sky a pale watercolor wash. People walked past her, blurred and faceless. They didn't look at her, didn't hear her, didn't exist. She ran to the park. The trees were paper flat. The fountain sprayed nothing. The benches were melting silhouettes. She screamed. No echo, no wind, no world. She found one person in focus, Esther, her neighbor, sitting calmly on a bench that didn't cast a shadow. You're further than most, Esther said. What is this? Joanna whispered. The in-between. I don't understand. Esther smiled sadly. You were overwritten, but your core held. You remembered. That changed things. Why me? You were always meant to resist. That's why the cycle keeps returning to you. Different name, same pattern. I saw your apartment vanish. I've been gone a long time. Esther's hands were fading, translucent at the edges. Where is everyone? Joanna asked. They forgot themselves. They didn't write. They let the protocol finish. But you didn't. Joanna sat beside her. Can I fix it? No, but you can finish it your way. Esther leaned close. Write your own story. Name yourself. Define your edges, or this place will keep you forever. She faded. Joanna returned to 6B. Inside, the furniture was back. The fridge buzzed. The kettle boiled. A stack of pages waited on the desk. The notebook she'd ignored. She sat, opened it, and began to write. My name is Joanna Lynn Barrow. I was born in 1992. I live in apartment 6B. I remember my mother's voice, my sister's laugh, the scent of cinnamon in October. I am not a shadow. I am not a duplicate. I am not hers. The walls flickered. The air thickened. The hallway filled with light. Someone knocked on the door. She stood, looked through the peephole. No one there, just a mirror. Her own face, clear, solid, smiling. It mouthed, "One more page." Part 8. The rewrite. Joanna stared at the mirror through the peephole. Her reflection stared back. It smiled. It mouthed, "One more page." She stepped back slowly, heart thudding in her ears. The notebook still sat on the desk, open to the last thing she had written, a declaration, a resistance, her name, her memories, her truth. She picked up the pen. She wrote, "I refuse the pattern." The air trembled. A low hum grew in the walls, not threatening but expectant, like the entire building was holding its breath. She kept writing, "I am not her. I am not theirs. I am not next." The light in the hallway flickered. The door rattled once, then silence. For the next hour, she wrote, page after page of who she was, who she'd been, what she remembered. Her first broken heart, her childhood bike, her grandfather's hands, the scar under her eye. The coffee shop that used to be on Drayton, the way the rain smelled the day she moved in. She wrote it all, and with every sentence, the apartment grew more solid. The floor beneath her feet felt warmer. The window showed trees, not gray blur. Time returned. Sound returned. Color deepened. She stood and opened the door. The number plate was back. 6B. Across the hall, Esther's door was open. Inside, quiet. No velvet headband, no banana bread trays. Just a small envelope on the floor. She picked it up. Inside, one last note, typed. "If she writes the ending, you won't have to. Burn the page." Joanna returned to her desk. The notebook was heavy in her hands now. She took a matchbook from the drawer, lit one, held it to the last page. The flame caught slowly and hungrily, then all at once. She dropped the notebook into the sink and watched it turn to ash. The next morning, the building felt different, lighter, as if something had finally moved on. She walked down the hall. Each door had a number, a name. No blank walls, no mirror corridors, no flickers. Downstairs, the mailboxes were labeled again. One read, J. Harrow, 6B. The barista at the coffee shop remembered her order. Her sister answered the phone. "Hey, Joe, I was just thinking about you." Joanna closed her eyes, smiled. 1 month later, she was packing to leave. She didn't want to, but she knew she should. Cycles didn't like being broken, and there were still blank places in the city. But before she left something behind, taped to the inside of the closet panel, a new note typed. "If you hear the typewriter, don't write her name. Write your own." She closed the panel, closed the closet, closed the door to apartment 6B for good. The end.